This episode is brought to you by freedadcourse.com. You are always one conversation away from changing your life, and the power of hello is something that I subscribe to every single day, and I'm always saying hello to new people everywhere I go. Increasing your opportunity, increasing your connection, and getting access to the solutions to the problems that you are facing, whether you're on active duty or just beginning your veteran transition or even transitioning out for 20 years. On the other side of hello are the solutions that you're looking for. Again, head on over to freedadcourse.com. Get your 5-episode audio course to create more connection, create more friendships, and get back to living the life that you're trying to design.
Dory 1, this is Fire Team Delta. Dad's coming home.
Welcome to the Military Veteran Dad Podcast, where it is our mission to bring every dad home. I am your host, Ben Killoy. I'm a United States Marine veteran, husband, and a father. We will bring authentic conversations to inspire action in your life so we can close the gap between the dad you are today and the dad you want to be tomorrow. This is the Military Veteran Dad Podcast.
Welcome back to the Military Veteran Dad, episode 01 of our new Friday mini-series. For now, we'll call it a mini-series because that's the only name I've got. And like I dropped on Wednesday, on New Year's Day, this is going to be a new weekly episode on Friday where you just get me, my thoughts, my take on something, maybe a story about my life, how it's shaped me, how it's helped me create who I am today. And if you would like to help name this episode, these series on Friday, I'm looking for ideas. So if you have an idea, drop me an email, ben@militaryveterandad.com. You can drop me on Instagram @BenKilloy or Twitter @BenKilloy as well. I'm also on Facebook. Email is probably the easiest way though as well, just to drop an idea of a name. And really it's just going to be me on the microphone giving you additional thoughts on what I think it means to be a dad in 2020 and creating an amazing legacy. Today, we're going to dive into a little bit of deprecating humor about myself. And I want to share a story. And this short story is super vivid in my mind. And it's shaped my life ever since it's happened, even though I never really knew that it was. So flashback, it's 2004. I'm in Okinawa. It's hotter than hell. The humidity, it's like breathing underwater. And if you've been to Okinawa and stationed on Okinawa, you know that they make you wear white shirts for almost a month to signal that you're the new guy. So that way, if you drop while you're PTing, you know that they need to react a little bit faster because you're new. And so I've always hated running. Even before I got to Okinawa, running wasn't my friend. It was something that always just held me back. I was always a crappy runner. Even from the very first 1 mile physical fitness test I had to do for recruiting, I was never good at it. I even remember running at Camp Lejeune on the tank trails that just seemed to go on forever. And I never knew where they were going to turn around. And it was such a mind fuck to never know when they're going to turn around, never be able to pace your energy to where they're going to turn you around. And I always just felt like it was easier to give up on myself, to fall out of that formation. I probably fell out almost every formation. Probably the only time I really didn't was in boot camp, where you really had a drill instructor out in your ass to make sure that you were right there in the trenches in that platoon, not falling out. But back to Okinawa. So I had just gotten to Okinawa. I'd maybe been there a little over a month probably. But I really, running obviously hadn't gotten any better because it's super hot over there. And I arrived in the summer as well. So we're talking like July. And our platoon sergeant, the super motivated person, he was a poster board Marine. And he decided to PT us that day. And when he is going to be all out. He is all about it. And we maybe were like, I don't know, a mile into it. And I'm starting to fall out. I'm starting to give up. I'm already dropping out of formation. And I'm like, oh man, I'm not going to be able to hold on to this. It's just going to be too much. And I'm going to look like a bag of ass and I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get yelled at after this is all over. And we're just making a turn and we're going up a hill. And I remember him yelling back to me at the top of his lungs, "Killoy, are you weak?" And at the top of my lungs, instinctively, without a single point of hesitation, I yell back, "Yes, sir." And that moment of yelling back, "Yes, sir," I am weak has played out through almost the rest of my life from that moment. And if you've been listening to the podcast, you know that I've been talking about how a story and the emotions of that story are your brain's perception of how it reacts to future things. So there's been many things future since that moment that I reflect the feelings and emotions of being weak, not strong enough, not having what it takes. It can be triggered even by my kids. Will flash me back to that moment of being weak. And that feeling of weakness was something that plagued me forever. So ever since it happened, like I said. But that's been a feeling that I was running from. I wasn't really acknowledging it. I remember the story. It was always vivid, but I never really realized subconsciously how the thought of saying that I was weak, that my brain was actually making choices subconsciously to prove that that was true. And ultimately, it was because I wasn't processing the feelings related to that weakness. I wasn't processing that for running was more about the fear of failure. Even just this past summer, I really reconciled my fear of running. Like, I had a fear of running because there was a huge pile of emotion wrapped up in the fear of falling out, knowing I'm going to feel like a failure. I hated that feeling. I hated the look of other Marines looking at me when I dropped out because I just let them down. And as a Marine, you're supposed to be a unit. You're supposed to stay together. And I was consistently always letting others down. And that theme has played out in my marriage, my parenting, my career, all of it. All of it retreats back at a single moment. I can trigger myself to that weak Marine that said, yes, sir, that I am too weak to move on. And that's an important part of being a military dad, that you need to recognize there are moments in your life, even maybe from your childhood, that you are confirming over and over in your daily activities, whether you realize it or not. Your brain can't help but interpret your future and your current present, but based on those previous things that happened to you. And by them happening to you, you need to realize that they happened, but you also need to be able to reframe it, to re-look at that and say, how can that happen for you? Now, so if I take this example of me saying that I was weak, how does it serve me now? Now I recognize it as a low point. I recognize it as a turning point where I can now look at that point and say, I was weak. And now I can also look at others around me and recognize that same look. I can recognize that same look of not feeling good enough because I was that person. So I've been able to take this entire story of being weak. I've been able to confront it and tell you on a podcast that it happened, but it all kind of happened. And now I have to turn it around and try to do something positive with it. And by turning something positive with it, I can now apply new meaning to it. And by applying new meaning to it, I can then help to give it a different definition. And then the triggers of my current moments as they happen are interpreted that wasn't something that happened against me, it happened for me. Because now I can use that, and I can also use it with my kids, that when they get picked on, when they get pushed down, I was that person. I know what that emotion feels like. I can turn it around and help them walk through it. And I can't tell you, like I said, how strong of an emotion that was. But that emotion was something I was running from, the feeling of not being good enough. And it was reinforced by me saying at the top of my lungs, yes, sir, I am weak. And again, that played out in my head over and over and over. So I challenge you, the military dad, listening to this, figure out what stories, what events, what triggers, or what memories are core memories, if you think of the movie Inside Out, what core memories define who you are, but not in a good way, that define your interpretation of your future life based on the events of the past. And if you recognize those, then you can start to begin to change them. Once you begin to change them, that's how you apply new interpretation. And when you apply new interpretation, then you can start to take different actions and respond differently to that story in a positive way that helps you move your life forward. So I hope this story of telling a little bit of story defecating about myself and where I was in 2004 mentally, and that helps a little bit of you guys to recognize by me sharing something vulnerable, it allows you to share something vulnerable. And like I've talked a lot of times, all it takes is one vulnerable thought to cancel out another thought that someone else is having. And that one step, that one cancellation can be that one step that makes a dad come home. So I hope you guys enjoyed this very first episode. We'll keep bringing them back every Friday. And like I said, I'm looking for a name. And with that, I'll sign off and I'll talk to you again on Monday.